Thank you for joining us today for our Principal Investigator Research Series. My name is Melinda Robinson. I'm the Director of Sponsored Programs. And just FYI, we will be recording this session for those of you who would like to refer back to it later. Also, if there is someone unable to attend, they will have the opportunity to view it at that time. If anyone has any topic ideas, we are in the process of planning for future presentations. So if you have any idea for our Principal Investigator Series, we would really appreciate any input that you could give us that would be pertinent to you as an investigator. So with that, I'm going to introduce one of our speakers today. We'll be hearing from Anna Simonson. She is the librarian liaison to the medical school and the health and natural sciences. She received her PhD from the Graduate Center, City University of New York, and her master's in library and information science from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She completed her postdoc with Danielle Kenyon's lab at Sanford Research with the Population Health Group. Her research interests include information access, health humanities, digital scholarship, and the history of medicine. She is the head of the new library initiative named Digital Scholarship and Research Services that aims to support the research of the faculty, staff, and students at USD. Today's presentation is titled NIH Management, Data Management, and Sharing Plan Training. Please join me in welcoming Anna Simonson.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad you're all here today. So as Melinda said, the focus of today is the new NIH policy that requires that you submit a data management and sharing plan with your grant applications. So this really is for people who are at all levels. Maybe you came with a draft, or maybe you aren't yet sure what this is all about and you want to hear about it. So I tried to create something that would be valuable in some way to everybody. For those of you who might be joining on Zoom, hopefully my graduate research assistant was able to log on, and he will monitor the chat and let me know if you have anything in there so I can address your questions as well. So the goal today is simple, and really it's to send you home feeling more confident about writing this data management plan to include with your grant application. So, you know, you might even finish a section or two while you're here at the end, because we're going to have a little bit of time to workshop it. So I'm not the only one presenting today. And so our agenda is pretty simple. First, the research computing group is going to share with you at the end of our last session that we did on the new plan in November. I think it was November 17th. A lot of people had questions about storing their data and storing large data sets. And so we thought it would be really useful to you to have the research computing group here to share with you about data storage options at USD. So they're going to be talking first, and that's Ryan Johnson and Bill Kahn. And then secondly, we're going to just answer two quick questions. Do I actually need to write this? Who does it apply to? And then why is it important? And the reason I have the second question on there is because this is really the spirit of the plan. And that question kind of undergirds all of the questions that the plan has. Then we'll cover the 6 elements of the DMS plan. And we have the Director of Human Subjects Research with us, Mark Guilford, and he's going to cover the last 2 elements of that plan. Of the 6 elements. And then I'm going to talk to you about a tool that you may or may not be familiar with. It's called the DMP tool. And if you've never heard of that, I'm really excited that you're here because I think it's going to make things a lot easier for you. So it really is a guide for writing this exact plan, and there's a template from the NIH in it, and it will prompt you and just walk you through the entire plan and then generate it for you. So we'll talk about that, and then at the end we'll have questions. And if you did bring your plans, we can look at those. We can talk through each element, and I have a handout that can kind of it's from the DMP tool actually, with fill in the blank sections that really walks you through each section. So I think that will be helpful for you. So we're going to start off here though with Ryan and Bill and the Research Computing Group.
Thank you, Anna. A little close there. So yeah, my name is Ryan. My name is Ryan Johnson. I'm the director of research computing here at USD. We also have Bill Kahn in attendance here. You can wave. You won't see him on the camera, but those attending in person can see him. So I've been with USD IT for about 22 years, but I've spent the last 3 years in research computing. And then, so I'm responsible for kind of leading the group, also for seeking external funding. Most of our systems that we support here in IT are grant funded, so that's a big part of my job. And Bill is more the actually getting the work done and helping the users and making sure their systems are working for their needs. So like I say, what would you say you do here? It reminds me, if anyone remembers the old BASF commercials in the 90s, say, we don't make a lot of the products you buy, we make a lot of the products you buy better. That's a lot like what Anna's initiative is. We're looking for ways to help researchers enhance their work and really just reduce their time to discovery. And the way we do that is largely centered around the concept of cyber infrastructure. So I've stolen this definition here from Indiana University. But this term was coined by the National Science Foundation. It consists of basically of computing systems, data storage systems, advanced instruments, data repositories, basically all the computery technology stuff that serves to enhance research. And I've highlighted data storage systems. So most of what our group does is centered around high performance computing, but today, given this topic, we're going to be talking more about the data storage side of things. So really our main resource that we have and that we really push people to is called the South Dakota Data Store. This was rolled out within the last 5 years. It was funded with a combination of National Science Foundation and Board of Regents grant funding. It is designed from the ground up to support research data. And it consists of 2 tiers. The first is what we call the sharing tier. It's disk-based. It's what you're used to if you see like your X drive, your standard network share. You can access it in that way. And that is for your working data, your actual data that you're working with on a day-to-day basis. Then we also have the archive tier. That is a tape-based system, magnetic tape, that's located at the USD Sioux Falls campus. That's a slower, more long-term storage solution. We usually say write once, read rarely or ever or never. This system, there are fees to buy into this. It's a one-time fee though, and then you'll have storage for the life of the system. And one thing to note is that you can include these costs in your proposals. We've had people do that in the past, and that's something where we can provide those numbers. So if you know the amount of data that your study or that your project you anticipate it accumulating, you can include those costs in your proposals. And the system makes sharing data with collaborators very easy with what's called the Globus platform. We have a subscription to that, so that gives you a nice interface for transferring data, from a desktop up to a SDDS or other storage system, and sharing with collaborators. Now, while we do, the SDDS really is our primary research data storage repository. I know with NIH data, you tend to have more, regulated data, HIPAA, whatnot. So we do also wind up sending folks to SharePoint occasionally. So that you're probably familiar with. I mean, it's a Microsoft platform. It's really designed for business, but because of we have a business associate agreement with Microsoft that makes it actually suitable for storing regulated data. So that's something that if you have a relatively small amount of data, or if it is, something that's, sensitive, regulatory, has requirements like that, that's something that we might steer you to. So I love comparison charts. So I made one here to kind of give you a little comparison between these 2 systems that we offer. So SharePoint, there's no cost to use that. The university pays for it, but that's not something that has a cost for the actual use of it. Whereas with SDDS, the cost is $200 per terabyte for the sharing tier and $50 per terabyte for the archival tier. SharePoint is cloud-based, whereas SDDS is local. The sharing, the disk-based tier is actually located here in our Slagle Hall data center, and the tape system is at the USD Sioux Falls campus. Both have easy web accessible interfaces, sharing with outside collaborators. Now, SDDS, that is going to be the solution if you have a large amount of data. If you're talking terabytes or even high numbers of more than a couple gigabytes, SharePoint's not going to be the answer for you. Same thing if you have large individual files. I think SharePoint caps that out at 2 gigabytes per file. Where with SDDS, there's much I don't even know if there would be a limit, but it's up there. And then, like I mentioned, suitable for protected data, SDDS, if you have de-identified data, you're okay. But if it's anything that's sensitive, that's not really not designed for that. And I also put self-service here for SharePoint because technically you don't even need our help to create a SharePoint site. Anyone with a USD account can do that. However, I put asterisks all over the place here. One for the comparison chart because there are other platforms. These are just kind of the two that we would tend to be directing people toward. And same with the suitable for protected data. Please talk to us if you do have any questions about a platform's suitability for protected data, because we can help you go through the specifics and make sure that it is actually suitable for your needs. And same thing with the self-service. If you are planning on using SharePoint, especially if it's for protected data, we would highly recommend that you contact us just to ensure that we are checking all the boxes and have everything that we need in place. So this pretty much wraps up my part of the presentation, and I have to leave at about 3:15, but Bill is going to be here throughout. So if anyone does have any questions later on in the presentation, he knows a lot more about this than I do anyway, so he'll be better able to help you. But also you can find us in Coyote One Stop. We have request forms for computing and data services. Also the Research Computing Group website, rcg.usd.edu, email at rcg@usd.edu, or emailing the service desk. And then again, questions in person. You can catch myself for the next 15 minutes or Bill. But if you do have questions later, we have begun having office hours in the DSRS, thank you. In ID Weeks 102 every Wednesday from 10 to 11 a.m. So if you or your students ever have any questions, feel free to pop in and we can help you there. All right. So, all right, thank you, everyone.
Does anyone have any questions for Ryan? Here, Ryan, I'm going to give it back to you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Mark.
Can you say a few words about how these data storage solutions you just managed are the same as or different as it relate to the USD data repository?
Oh, is it red data? I am actually not very familiar with that system, so I don't.
You're not the person to go to with their questions about that.
Correct, and I'm not sure. Yeah, Danielle Loftus would be the person. Oops, for any questions related to that. Yep.
Quick question. In terms of cost, you said storage for the lifetime of the system. What do you mean the system?
So that's for the system as it's built. It's about 4 or 5 years old at this point. So at some point in the future, we will need to be replacing it. So we don't really have a specific plan for how we would migrate the data afterwards. That's something where we would just be working with the users, either to just transfer it to a new system if we're able to get funding for that, or just essentially it's for the foreseeable future. That's the best answer I have at this point.
So for user pay the one-time fee, it's not guaranteed that data going to be saved.
No, not forever, but yeah, and that's something where, yeah, if you do have requirements, we can work with you to make sure that we have a plan. We can ensure that we would be able to maintain the data for the length of time you need, but that's just something we would have to talk about.
Can you bracket that a little bit? Like you're talking about more than just 1 or 2 years, but probably less than 10 or 15.
That's pretty close. I would say, yeah, 5 to 10 when we would be looking at replacing, but yeah, the next year, 1 to 2 years easily, probably at least 5.
Well, probably the next speaker would know what's the current NIH required, how long for it. I mean, people already need to access.
Well, they, the NIH, I don't want to speak for them, but they would probably say.
Online, they're not going to be able to hear you unless you talk
Yeah.
online.
Oh, Right, that's true. Yes. Oh, okay. So, someone wanted to know about the NIH requirement for storing data, how long you need to store it. So they don't have a specific answer for how long you have to keep it stored, but you do have to answer that question. So you do have to say how long you plan to keep it available for people. That answer is not indefinitely, right? Although if I had to speak for the NIH, they would want you to keep it available for as long as possible. So when you pick out a repository, they have all these different requirements. There's a lot and there's a checklist, and it has a lot to do with that aspect specifically, that it will be available. Yep.
I think it should be kept 3 years after the vote.
Yeah, at a minimum of 3 years, yes. But they don't say you have to keep it, available forever. Although that is kind of the spirit of this whole sharing plan, that it will be open. Yeah. Mhm.
So to elaborate a little bit more on the future plans, this system was built out entirely with grant funds. Now we have some small expansions that have been, based on the user fees for people buying in. But looking at a future funding opportunity where we would be replacing it, I think the most likely plan would be that any existing data that was on this system, we would plan on migrating to the new one and then having a similar charge model for anyone new joining. It's just can't say for sure just because it's kind of a nebulous future, unnamed grant opportunity, but that's what I would anticipate that we would do.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. Any other questions about that? I do have a slide at the end with all of the contact information, and we will send out an email after this with information, kind of duplicate information from after the last session, but we'll have all of our contact information included and some new stuff as well from this session. So the second part of our agenda was just to briefly touch on these two questions. How do you know that it applies to you? And this does actually come up a lot. The first thing I want to address, because I've gotten a few questions about this, is some people have felt that they don't need to write one if they're not generating a lot of data. This is a common question, and the NIH doesn't really care about how much you're ultimately generating as far as it relates to writing the plan. If you're generating any data, you have to write a DMS plan and include it in your grant application. So there's actually 3 things you need to consider. Number 1, are you generating scientific data? You need to write a plan. Number 2, does the grant that you're applying for fall under one of these activity codes there on the right? And what does your funding opportunity announcement say? Because some of them are specific. Also, it's important to pay attention to that funding opportunity announcement as far as data sharing goes, because the DMS plan, when you include it with your application, it does not get scored. It's not a part of your overall score. But if your FOA has data sharing as a part of it, it's a part of the project or a part of that grant, then it does become a part of your score. So your DMS plan in general is not, but I did want to point that out because I think that's a little bit tricky and I don't think it's highlighted very much. But so in general, it is not going to be scored. But so if you fall into any one of those 3 things, you're generating data, you have one of those activity codes, or the FOA specifically says that, then you do need to write the DMS plan. And where does it go? This is another question I get quite often. And for the PHS 398 form, which is probably what most people will be filling out, it goes on line 11. So that arrow right there, which is titled Other. So that is where you will upload your DMS plan when it is finished. For the budget, if you are budgeting and including data management and sharing as a part of your grant budget, you'll have a budget line that's specific to that. And there is a tool, Melinda found a tool, and we can share that with you again in the follow-up email for how you might calculate how much that would be. And I know that Ryan said he could also help you with that too. So why are they important? I think you probably already know the answers to these, but this really is the spirit of the entire plan. And so I just wanted to highlight it quickly. So number one, and this is from the NIH, so I'm kind of speaking on their behalf here, but it's required for reproducibility, right? So if the data is really messy and it hasn't been managed well, it's really hard to reproduce it. It's also hard to reproduce it if you can't access it. So that relates to the second point, that it facilitates data reuse. Because this is publicly funded, they want to be able to offer this to as many researchers as possible, because even small amounts of data can be helpful in ways that you might not anticipate well into the future, which is why they really want, ideally, it shared for at least 3 years, but ideally longer than that. Another point just about that I saw recently was that, you don't want in your plan to say, we'll give this to you if you request it, because that's not really the spirit of the plan. So I think some people have put that in there, but I would remove that and be very specific about, again, where you're going to store it and when it's going to be available and how long it's going to be available, not just if somebody asks me for it, we'll give that to them. And then it helps make data fair. And I'm sure you know the FAIR principles that the scientific community kind of adopted not that long ago. But these 4 aspects show up in all of them, almost all of the elements of the data management plan. That the data is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So findable, the ways, those the things that I put beneath there are the kind of the ways that they show up in the plan. So findable, are there descriptive keywords that are attached to that you're using for your data? Are you using DOIs, right? And these are things the plan will ask you for, but that all relates to findability. So it wouldn't be a terrible idea to use these FAIR principles in your plan. Accessible, right? That's the whole point of putting it in a repository that the NIH, it doesn't have to be an NIH repository, but one that follows the guidelines that they've come up with. They want it to be easy to retrieve by machines and humans. Interoperable, open formats with consistent vocabulary. So format is a thing that you're going to have to address in the DMS plan, and we will get to that in a second. And then they want that data reusable. So clear reuse licenses, good documentation. Again, this is all just undergirds every element of the 6 for the DMS plan. So what are the 6 elements? So a quick overview, there are 6 elements. It needs to be 2 pages or less, unless for some reason, and you can work this out with the NIH. You can talk to whoever your contact person is there for the grant that you're applying for. But they really do want it to be 2 pages or less. And one other thing that often gets overlooked is they do not want you to use URLs or hypertext in that document. They will return it to you. Which isn't the worst thing in the world if they return it to you. You can resubmit it. Again, it's not a part of your overall score, right? And perhaps you don't use hypertext and you don't use URLs. They might still return it to you because they see that some information is missing, or they want you to clarify things or elaborate on something, and they do give you time to do that. So while your grant is still being considered, you will have time to go through that. So there's 6 elements. Data type, related tools, software and code, standards, data preservation, access, and associated timelines. Again, access, so you can see access in a different way, but access is really important. Distribution or reuse considerations, and then element 6, who's going to oversee this entire thing. So the first element can be kind of detailed. Some of them you can really do in a sentence or 2, but the first one is more robust, and that's because it has 3 parts to it. They really want you to think through, what kind of data are you generating? So this first part is the types and the amount of scientific data that you're expecting to generate. Again, they use the word expect because they know that this is just a proposal. You will be allowed to change your plan. And it's very easy to do if you do use the DMP tool, which I'll show you in a little bit. But you will be allowed during progress reports and various things to update your plan. So this is not set in stone. So it's not something that should make you feel like you have to, abide by this perfectly. You can change it. The key to that is communication. Every time you make a change, if something changes in your research, you have to communicate it with the NIH and update your plan. So type is kind of broad. This is a wide variety of things, and only you really know what your research is. But I will show you some examples. So again, you're going to summarize that and the amount. They are concerned with the amount. Now, B is the scientific data that will be preserved and shared, and the rationale. So the NIH does not expect you to share all of your data. And that's why they have a second section here, this B, because all the data that you list in A might not be data that you're planning to share for a variety of reasons. And there are some justifiable reasons that you might not be able to share your data, some of which might relate to things that Mark Guilford will talk about with part 5. But so you just need to describe which data from that first section you're planning to share and why. Or if you're not sharing something, why are you not sharing it? The third part of this has to do with metadata or other relevant data that is associated with your data. So do you have a study protocol, right? Do you have a README file? Are you using any data collection instruments? Anything else that you are generating? They just want to know that you're generating it, right? So some examples of this, an example from element 1. I won't read all of this to you. They have tons of examples, by the way, on the NIH website and other websites as well. You will be able to find examples, some that might match your actual research quite clearly, which is really helpful. But so here they have the types, right? The survey interviews, and the amounts. This is what they're looking for here, okay? So what of that is going to be preserved? So they just go through very specifically about what data from that first part they're actually going to preserve and share. They're also pointing out what they won't share. Respondent identifiers will not be shared. A lot of what I've seen in this first element has to do with talking about what limitations are on your data and what you are not going to share and why. Don't forget the rationale part. So this, again, are you generating anything else? And what metadata are you creating? They're very interested in metadata, right? The data about your data, because that relates directly to findability, right? What, like this person is creating a user guide, a code book, and has study level metadata. And so the NIH just wants to know all of that information. Any questions so far about element 1? Yeah. Yes. Oh, yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
It looks like I got this wrong because originally my plan, so I thought this data type is kind of format.
Mm-hmm. Some people include format in this section. So type is really kind of broad. What I have seen that you might want to consider doing is including a chart, making a chart that has what data it is, the type of data, maybe the file format, the amount, all in different columns, because that's kind of how some people have addressed this broad category of type. So I have seen file format show up in element 1 in some of the examples. Yes. Yep. Yes, they do want to know what file format, only because, and actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because you'll see in element 2 that their standards for file format matter very much for accessibility. So let me actually move to number 2 because this will make more sense when I do that. So this has to do with related tools, software, and code. Do you need to use something to access your data? They want you to indicate whether specialized tools are needed. And the reason they want you to do this
Hi, may I interrupt?
has to do with,
Hi,
is there
Dr.
a question
Anna.
online?
Yes, there's a question in the chat.
Oh, there's a question. Sorry,
Yeah,
David.
I'll read
Okay.
it.
Can
How
you
do
see
you-
that question?
I'll read it.
How do you share data in an STTR grant when you are developing a proprietary product that will be patented?
That's going to be Mark Guilford's question. Do you want to answer that now?
Sure. So the question was about sharing data that may be proprietary or patented. And the short answer is don't share it until you talk with Beth Lambeth in my office, who's the tech transfer officer. And talk with her when you figure out what you're going to write in for element 5 here. It's okay to hold some things back for IP reasons. They just want it stated in the plan. You know, some data may be proprietary and that will not be shared, probably something like that. If you can refine it down a little bit closer than that, that would probably be better. But for sure, talk to Beth Lambeth in my office as you're trying to write that if you think that might apply. Does that answer your question for the person who's online? Okay, and I'm now realizing I was out of screen. I'm still, there I am. Hello, thank you. I'll be up in a minute. Great, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. Any other questions? Yeah.
Amount, again, I still don't know, so what's the amount of data?
The amount?
Yeah.
That might be, and again, that's broad. It might be the size of the files. It could be the actual size of the data, if it's files or images, right? It might be the number of participants. So one that I just read, it related to participants. We're collecting images on 50 people, you know, related to this. So it really depends on your data. But they have that kind of broad for that reason. So I've seen it relate to size of files. I've seen it relate to number of participants. It totally depends on what your research is. And if I remember right from what you had sent me, I would imagine that it relates to the size of the files.
Right, so the only thing I can count is the file number. That is really hard. Because
Yeah.
So slides, for example, so one animal, I count one animal to use 100.
Mhm.
That really depends on what's the you do. So Western blot, you have 10 or 12 full image. But for the staining, one animal we can stain tons of slides. Really, we just don't know among these.
I would guess the number of slides that you're going to produce. Again, this isn't set in stone. So like the number, it does not have to be what is actually produced. So if you just have a rough idea of how many, so it could be the number of animals. I mean, giving them as much information as you can is the best way to go. But again, it doesn't have to be 2 pages. So, but they'll send it back to you if they want more information. And this is not a bad thing. Getting it sent back does not speak to your grant application. So that is another thing I do want to emphasize is that having an unsatisfactory DMS plan does not mean that your grant is unsatisfactory. Yeah, and there's a steep learning curve, and they are going to be, I think, quite generous and helpful in this first year, especially in this first cycle, because I've read a lot of things. There are many researchers who are nervous about that, who are worried that their field is not ready for this because of the kind of things that they collect. And the NIH is aware of that. So, yeah.
I do have something to add to that. I think there was like a lot of concern. Oh, sorry. Yep. with which, like, what should we put, just to keep in mind that this is at the proposal stage, so, I mean, you can estimate what you think. And then if you are awarded, you will have opportunities to make those changes. But also, unless they're looking to award you, like there's some just in time, most likely you won't get it sent back if they're not. Because people were saying, well, why do we have to make these changes if we're not even gonna get scored or whatever? But if they ask for just in time information, they might have you make some changes to the plan.
Yep, that's a good point.
The amount of data, since it's all electronic coverage is the bytes, the number of bytes. It's actually related to the cost. It's the cost they can evaluate. Actually, they are asked, the study session member are asked to evaluate the budget in terms of whether the cost you request is appropriate or not. Which has something to do with the amount of data.
That's true. They will, if you have a budget line in there, the person who is evaluating your grant will look at your DMS plan if you want money for that. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, they'll evaluate the budget.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else? So this is just kind of their guidelines. They're looking for these formats that are going to be accessible in the future, that are going to be non-proprietary. However, I have seen some grants where someone is using proprietary software. Oftentimes there are some workarounds. So I recently saw one that had, a way to transfer that data. You could get an extension of some sort and you could transfer it between programs. One was proprietary, one was non-proprietary. If you are using proprietary data or proprietary software, you really are responsible for coming up with how other people are going to be able to access that data freely. So you should put in there, there is an extension for this, to be able to use it in this other non-proprietary software, or it's translatable between these two softwares. But these are the standard files, or their kind of ideal list of files that they would like you, and formats that they would like you to use. So as I said, some things are very short and some things are long. Like number 1 is a little more robust. Number 2 can be as short as this. It will be processed and analyzed with data and shared in many widely accessible formats, right? That's the entire element 2. 3 is standards. What standards are you using, if any? And it is okay to say there aren't any in your field currently that are used for this kind of data. That is an okay answer. So again, if you're using data dictionaries, data identifiers, unique identifiers, so some examples of standards that might show up in this section would be DOIs. You can actually connect your ORCID ID and the DMP tool. And if you are planning on using the DMP tool, you might, that could be something that you would include in there. Concepts like mesh terms, medical subject headings. Just if you're using any kind of standard, they just want to know about it. But again, it's okay to say there aren't any. And I have seen many that say that. So, and here FAIR shows up in this example. All these examples I got from the NIH, by the way. So in accordance with FAIR principles for data, we will use open file formats and persistent unique identifiers, such as RRIDs for resources and DOIs for protocols, right? You get the idea. They just want to know that you're thinking about this. This is kind of, you're giving them your word that you're going to abide by these things, and they want to know that you're going to share your data and make it as accessible as possible. So element 4 relates to what Ryan was talking about, because this is all about the repository and where you're going to store your data, preservation, access, and associated timelines. So they want plans for where you're going to put your data and when, and how long it's going to be there, right? They want the name of the repository. If they have one, sometimes your FOA might say, or your subject might have kind of just a general subject specific or data specific repository that people generally deposit in. And But they want the name of that repository. How it's going to be findable. Sometimes one of the things in the list of repositories that they approve of, a lot of those repositories assign an identifier to that data. So it's findable in that way. And that's why they have that as a qualification for a good repository. And then when it will be made available to others. So according to this new policy, it needs to be made available upon publication or by the end of your grant period. Okay, so those are their two things. If you get an extension, right, you can wait. It can go to the end of that extension. But but if you publish or your grant comes to an end, you need to have your data shared by then. And it's okay actually just to write that in there. I will share either upon my first publication or at the end of the grant cycle. So here's an example of element 4. So again, they're just telling you where they're going to put their data, when they're doing it, how you're going to find it. Okay, so those FAIR principles are all over element 4. Any questions about element 4? Or any of the elements, really? Yeah.
Maybe a question about the strategy. At the end of the period, end of the cycle.
Can I give you this?
They are different, the meaning differently.
Mm-hmm.
So the budget period usually is 1 year. Period 1, period 2, period 3. If the R1 grant for 4 or 5 years, they have 4 or 5 periods. Cycle, assuming just 4 or 5 years, each competitive cycle, publication is easier. But often I think we need to figure, I certainly need to figure it out some one way or another. Often we would not be able to publish the results until towards the end or even after the grants is over. And that how to deal with that or looks at the new rules, you have to deposit a share even before you publish it. Is that true or?
Yeah, what? Whichever comes first. So it is true that you might have to share your data before you publish. Yeah. And this is another thing that a lot of researchers are concerned about or have concerns with for sure. And that is something you can, talk with the person, your contact at the NIH when you're applying for the grant. I would bring this up. But they just want you to detail when your plans are for sharing it. Yeah.
The IPO is probably going to become more easier.
Yeah. Yes.
Since he says use this comparator.
Yep.
Get away without deposit before you publish.
Mm-hmm.
File a declaration, this will be your IPO.
Beth's gonna love that.
Until end of research, I don't know it's gonna be IPO or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
We'll not have a new finding that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of things that are going to have to be worked out this first year. It's not going to be a perfectly seamless, there's a lot of things they probably didn't anticipate that are going to come up. But what I do know is that they have reiterated a lot that they are willing to work with you, right? And not all of your data has to be shared. You just have to have a good reason for not sharing it. So I will say that, they're trying not to be unreasonable about it while still pushing for the open science. Yeah. So yeah, you can say that you're not sharing something, but just give them a good reason. So I'm going to hand it over to Mark for element 5.
Okay, thank you, Anna. So again, I'm Mark Guilford. My role is that I'm the director of the IRB program. So I'm very much a human subjects person. I know a lot of you all who are here today and listening Don't work with a lot of human subjects data, but I'm not going to spend much time on these elements. And of course, they still apply to you. So element 5, what are those limits going to be? We've been talking about it, right? We had a question about IP come up earlier. We had a question about IP just now. Intellectual property protection, maybe there's something here that's going to go to a patent. Maybe there's something else proprietary. So that's one classification. Another thing, if you are working with human subjects data, do you have the consent of the people you got the data from to put it in an open access repository, right? So what you would do is you would just say, we will get informed consent from everyone to put it in a repository. We will work with the IRB to make sure that it is de-identified. Another big category that can come up, things that are controlled by relevant laws. Primarily what we're going to be thinking of there is like HIPAA protected information. Again, de-identifying that can be a remedy for it. So, you know, we will make sure to de-identify so that HIPAA does not restrict how we will share this data. If anyone's got educational data they're going to be working with, FERPA exists as well. If anyone works with tribes, there are special considerations that come into play if you are potentially sharing data collected from tribes. There are extra layers of consent, not just from the individuals, but from the tribal groups themselves. Come to my office, talk with us. We will put you in touch with the people you need to speak with to think about that. And then a nice catch-all, anything else? So a couple of examples. First, a very easy one. There are no restrictions. Everything will be open access. Brevity is good, right? Here is a terrible example. This is a parody. Do not write any of your elements like this. Factors affecting subsequent access, distribution, or reuse, no additional limitations other than blah, 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 blah. Your whole plan's supposed to be 2 pages. You can't write an element that's going to take 1.5 pages like this. This is from the NIH website, so I don't know. I think they wanted it as a bad example. So that's element 5, restrictions on access. Element 6, oversight. Again, this is one that should be pretty easy because hopefully you can just say it's going to be the PI. The PI will be responsible. The PI will work with university IT or office staff in order to implement it. Anne is going to get to some examples here later in the slides and in showing you the tool that has language you can just drop in here. Any questions about elements 5 or 6? Okay, see, I told you that was going to be quick.
Any hand gestures? Thank you. Any questions before we move on to the DMP tool? Okay. So using the DMP tool for your data management and sharing plan. So why should you use it? It's free and open. It's very easy. We have actually applied to be a partner institution. It's in the works. I don't think they reject these things, to my knowledge. So we should, did they get back to you yet?
Yeah, I think they're working on it.
Okay. So eventually, when you type in your USD email, it will register that you are affiliated with the University of South Dakota. And any specific templates that we put in there will pop up. And you will also get a special tab in there that I will show you in a second. But it's free and open. It's a web-based form for writing your plan. It leads you through it by breaking down all of the elements, and it guides you with these prompts. And it gives you links to all sorts of guidance and suggested answers. What I have noticed in this DMS plan on all the writing, they don't seem to be concerned about plagiarism. So you can just take stuff, right? As long as it is relevant to your data, you can just take it and fill in the elements that relate to your data, okay? I have not found anything that makes that seem like it's a problem. So here's the homepage. I don't think any of you have your computers with you, which is fine, but it's very simple to set up an account. You'll have to set up an account if they haven't finished setting up USD as a partner. Once USD is a partner, you'll be connected to that. But in the meantime, you'll just have to fill out a couple of lines and create an account. So this is the homepage. You can check and see what our status is down here. And hopefully that will be quick. So the funder requirements, you can kind of, if you click on that, you'll be able to look up the NIH and see there's tons of documents in there. Public DMPs, that might be really useful to you because people who are allowing other people to look at their DMP plans and get them uploaded onto the DMP tool, you will almost certainly find some very closely related to your research on there. And so you can look for models to model your work on, and then the help. So you're going to put your institution email in there. And this is the new account setup page. So just a few lines. It's really very simple. They've tried to make this as simple as possible. Anyone in the room, have you ever used the DMP tool? Or, okay. Yep. Mm-hmm. So once you get in there, this is what your page is going to look like. You're going to have a dashboard. You're going to have a tab to create your plan. Again, you're going to have those things you had on the home page, so you can look back at funder requirements. But those, you'll be able to select the NIH, you'll see, and you'll be able to apply that to when you create the plan. So typically, you would just go in and hit Create Plan. So the first thing that they're going to ask you is to, write the title of your research project, your organization, which is going to be the University of South Dakota, or you might have to, again, we'll see how long it takes them to get us in there, but the NIH, right, the primary funding organization, and then they just uploaded the template for the NIH, the brand new guidelines, and so those exact guidelines and wording will come up when you select the NIH template down here. So you'll select all of those things, fill all of that out. If you want to test it, you can actually test it and make a fake one before you decide to jump all in and do a real one, and do a mock one by selecting this. So that might be something. I always like to do that first. So if you feel like you don't want to jump right in, you can also do a test run. Okay, so once you hit Create Plan, this is the page that you're going to get. So the first one is Project Details. Again, your project title here, the abstract. You don't have, the fields are not required. But there are a couple, like the title is required, but fill out as much as would be helpful to you, right? And again, this will be saved in your account, so it's something that you can always return to. And then if you need to update it throughout your project, you can just come into your DMP plan into the tool and update it and save it. And the NIH will be notified about that. They'll be able to come in and see that you have updated your plan. So collaborators, if you're working with anybody, especially if you're working with anyone at another institution, this is where you can add them in there. So this is important because different institutions have different requirements. So that guidance from the different universities will be included if you have the same collaborator. So make sure you select this guidance DMP tool, and then you'll be able to see the list of which universities you want to receive guidance from. So that would be your institution or your collaborator. The next one is write the plan. This is the heart of the whole thing. This is where you'll spend most of your time. Research outputs, we'll talk about that in a second because that's not a required one. Request feedback is one that will only show up once the University of South Dakota is a partner institution. So if you log in now and it is not there, don't be alarmed. At the end, you'll be able to download your report, and then you can finalize it and publish it. You can, as I said before, you can connect it to your ORCID account. And so that's what I mean by publishing it. You can make it public. You can have it show up right away in your ORCID account. So that's just something to be aware of. So let me skip right here. So when you're picking out your the guidance, this is what that guidance page is going to look like, right? So you'll be able to kind of go through the list and see what guidance you want. The DMP tool has a lot of great guidance, so I would automatically select that one. Here's what that collaborator page looks like. Again, you're going to get a lot of prompts when you go through this, so it's really intuitive. That's one of the great things about this tool. You probably won't have a ton of questions that aren't answered by the tool itself. It really does a great job of telling you what to fill in where. So this, as I said, is the heart of it. And as you'll see, those 6 elements that we talked about are the 6 elements that show up under the right plan when you have selected the NIH as your template. You're going to get that exact wording. It's really, really simple once you have selected that template to be able to fill out all this information. So you're going to write your text, okay, for each of the 6 elements. You're going to just click on those plus signs and write it for each one. Now they are going to give you some sample language. They will give you the guidance on the right-hand side of that page, you can see. And they will also use that same exact language from the blank template that the NIH has provided on their website at the top there. So it really is quite useful for this particular plan. So you can see this is a blow up of the ones down at the bottom there, that sample language. They also, and I really liked this, is that they have some fill in the blank. Like if you just aren't sure what you need to write here, they have fill in the blank sentences that you can just pull and put your data in there. And I will give you a handout of that at the end too, but I got it from the DMP tool because I thought it was so useful. This is, again, not mandatory for writing your DMS plan, but if you want to include the different types of data that you are generating in this outside of the right plan section, right? You have to write your types in the plan under the right plan, but this can be useful for a variety of different reasons. So if you want to put like data sets, separate them, and just keep track of things in a different way, you can use that that section. You'll be able to select your repositories. You can look up metadata standards, release dates. I mean, it really has it has more than what you'll need to write your plan. So the request feedback tab will show up once we're a partner institution, and I'm actually not sure if I will be notified or if Melinda will be notified, but one of us will be notified that you have submitted a DMS plan once our institution is affiliated with the DMP tool. And then we'll be notified that we can go in and review it for you and leave comments for you. So you'll get the comments right in the tool, and then you can make your adjustments or do whatever it is before you download it. You can download it in several different formats. You can select different things to be included or not included. Probably don't do the unanswered questions for when you're submitting it to the NIH. So make sure you pay attention to what is selected down here. And if you didn't fill out your research inputs, you'd want to deselect that. So yeah, lots of different file formats for your options. And then you can set your visibility. You can make it public so people can log in and find your plan, or you can attach it to your ORCID account right there. Any questions about the DMP tool? I will send out an email as soon as we have confirmation that USD is a member. I imagine it won't take that long, but feel free to start prior to that. You can certainly start working in there right away. It is very simple to make an account. And the only thing you will not have access to prior to our participation is that request feedback tab. So there are a few places you can go to find out more about the DMP tool. If you want, I can definitely walk you through it. So there's some resources.